안녕하세요.
The city of Seoul pulsed under the golden hues of dawn, its grandeur reflected in the mirrored glass of towering skyscrapers. At the heart of this urban empire stood the colossal headquarters of Hwang Enterprises, one of South Korea's most powerful corporations. Its corridors were filled with impeccably dressed executives, hurried employees, and an unforgiving atmosphere where only the strongest survived. At the top of this power chain, Hwang Ji-hoon, the infamous billionaire CEO, strode through the grand lobby. Tall, impeccably poised, and with a sharp gaze, he exuded authority with every step. Known for his brilliant mind and ruthless methods, Ji-hoon rarely displayed emotion, whether in business or in life. Nothing ever broke his focus until that moment. On the other side of the lobby, Kang Ha-yoon, an administrative staff member, struggled to balance a stack of documents while holding her phone between her shoulder and ear. Her simple corporate uniform and unassuming bun set her apart from the polished sophistication around her. Yet, her determined expression made it clear that she was not someone easily intimidated. "Yes, I'm already on my way down with the reports," she said, quickening her pace. And then it happened. A subtle misstep on the lobby's plush carpet threw her off balance, sending the papers in her arms flying through the air, scattering across the gleaming marble floor. Ha-eun felt herself tilting forward, and before she could react, a firm hand grasped her arm, stopping her fall. For a brief moment, silence filled the air. She looked up only to find herself face to face with Hwang Ji-hoon, the very president of the company, holding her with an impassive stare. The employees nearby held their breath, watching the scene unfold. The CEO rarely interacted with staff outside the executive board, and yet here he was, gazing at Ha-eun as if trying to decipher something about her. "You should be more careful." His voice was low but carried an undeniable authority. "This isn't a marketplace." "Ha!" Yoon's eyes widened, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. She quickly freed herself from his grip and bowed respectfully. "I'm sorry, sir. She hastily knelt to gather the scattered documents, feeling the piercing gazes of her colleagues. Ji-hoon remained still, observing her. It was odd. Employees in her position usually trembled or lost their words in his presence. Yet this woman simply regained her composure and resumed her task with steady hands, as if unaffected. "Your name?" he asked, his expression unchanged. Ha-eun swallowed hard. "Kang Ha-in, from the administrative department, sir." Ji-hoon was silent for a moment. The name was unfamiliar. After all, he rarely concerned himself with employees outside the upper management. That was his only response before he turned and walked toward his private elevator. As the doors slid shut, Ha-eun exhaled a sigh of relief, lowering her head. This was definitely not how she wanted to get the CEO's attention. But little did she know this seemingly trivial encounter was about to change her life forever. The week following the encounter in the lobby was unlike any other in Kang Ha-eun's life. Her colleagues whispered as she passed by, and curious gazes followed her through every department, all because the powerful CEO, Hwang Ji-hoon, had taken notice of her existence. At first, Ha-eun tried to ignore it. She kept to her routine, making every effort to remain invisible. But fate seemed to have other plans. For the third time that week, while organizing files in the 20th floor conference room, she heard firm footsteps crossing the carpet. Turning around, she felt a chill run down her spine. Ji-hoon was there, watching her. "You seem to be a diligent employee, Kang Ha-eun." She straightened her posture, keeping her expression neutral. "I'm just doing my job, sir." Ji-hoon walked to the table, picked up one of the reports, and flipped through it absent-mindedly. He could see the tension in her shoulders. Was it fear or just nervousness? For some reason, he wanted to find out. "The administrative department has issues with organization. I received the wrong documents twice this week. Do you know anything about that?" Ha-eun took a deep breath before responding. "Yes, sir. We had a system failure, but we're already correcting it. Today's reports are accurate." Silence hung between them for a few seconds. Ji-hoon didn't need to be there in person. He could have sent an email, asked an assistant. But for some reason, He wanted to see Kang Ha-yoon again. There was something about her that intrigued him. "I'm glad to know you're competent." She blinked a few times, surprised by the unexpected albeit curt compliment. By the time she processed it, Ji-hoon was already leaving. As soon as he stepped out, Ha-yoon let out a long sigh. Her heart pounded in her chest. Why was the CEO giving her so much attention? And more importantly, why did it affect her so much? What she didn't know was that this was only the beginning. In the days that followed, Ji-hoon found himself increasingly distracted. His once flawless routine was now punctuated by recurring thoughts of Kang Ha-yoon. It disturbed him deeply. He had always been a rational man, guided by strategy and calculated decisions. So why was an administrative employee unsettling him so much? The greatest proof that his feelings were spiraling out of control came during a meeting with the company's directors. While his executives discussed a new expansion project, Ji-hoon realized he wasn't absorbing anything being said. His gaze, unintentionally, drifted toward the slightly open door of the conference room. And there she was. Ha-yoon was organizing documents outside, focused on her task. Her movements were quick, precise. The simple act of watching her made Ji-hoon lose himself in thought. It wasn't until one of his directors cleared his throat that he noticed the awkward silence in the room. "President Huang, would you like to add anything to the proposal?" He immediately composed himself, resuming his usual indifferent expression. Number continue. But he couldn't ignore this for much longer. That night, as he reviewed reports in his private office within the building, he heard a soft knock on the door. "Come in." The door opened slowly, revealing Ha-yoon holding a folder. "Sir, the finance department asked me to deliver this personally." Ji-hoon took the folder without looking away from her. "Sit down." Ha-yoon hesitated. He wasn't the type to waste time on formalities. What did he want? Still, she obeyed, keeping her hands on her lap, nervous. "How long have you worked here?" 3 years, sir." And why did you choose this company?" Ha-yoon met his gaze carefully before answering. "Because it's the best. And because my family needed me to have a stable job." Ji-hoon absorbed her words. Her dedication went beyond mere ambition. That made him smile, slightly rare gesture. "I see." Ha-yoon felt something shift in that moment. The man who had always seemed distant and ruthless appeared different now, more human. And, as irrational as it was, something inside her quickened. Before she could dwell on it, Ji-hoon said something that made her heart race. "I'd like to get to know you better, Kang Ha-yoon." And in that instant, the danger of their growing closeness became undeniable. The tension between Ji-hoon and Ha-yoon only grew stronger. The stolen glances, the conversations that seemed casual yet carried profound meaning. However, reality imposed itself with cruel precision. That afternoon, the board of directors convened an emergency meeting. The reason? A growing rumor about Ji-hoon's closeness to an administrative employee. Such a situation was unacceptable for a CEO of his stature. "President Huang, we hope you understand the gravity of this situation," one of the directors said, his voice laden with authority. "Your involvement with an employee could tarnish the company's reputation." Ji-hoon remained impassive, his fingers interlaced on the table. He knew there was no concrete evidence, only whispers. But the board was relentless. "We are suggesting that you remove Kang Ha-yoon from the company. This will prevent any unnecessary scandal." The mere thought of forcing her out irritated him deeply. Since when did he allow others to dictate his life? But he also knew that his position required caution. Later that night, Ji-hoon waited for Ha-yoon in the company's private parking lot. When she appeared, she looked at him with surprise and perhaps a hint of concern. "President Huang, we need to talk." Ha-yoon hesitated but nodded. Inside the luxurious car, the silence was thick. Ji-hoon got straight to the point. "The board wants me to remove you." She clenched her fingers in her lap. Her heart sank. "I figured this would happen." Ji-hoon turned to face her, his gaze more intense than ever. "But I won't let that happen." "Ha!" Yoon's eyes widened in surprise. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "I'm not a man who backs down from a challenge." "And you?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. You've become a challenge I don't want to lose. Ha-yoon felt her chest tighten. She wanted to say this was madness, that he should give up. But in that moment, she realized she didn't want to walk away either. Then, what do we do? Ji-hoon gave a slight, determined smile. We fight. Together. And with that, the decision was made. The battle against the company and their own families was just beginning. The following days were a silent war. Ji-hoon stood firm in his decision, ignoring the board's warnings and his family's threats. His father, Hwang Tae-sung, a financial industry tycoon, made sure to summon him for a private meeting at the family mansion. Seated in a spacious hall with dark walls and mahogany furniture, Ji-hoon waited for the inevitable confrontation. I've heard some concerning things about you. Tae-sung's voice was sharp as he entered the room. Tell me they're just baseless rumors. Ji-hoon met his father's cold gaze without wavering. If the rumors say I'm in love with Kang Ha-yoon, then they're true. Silence fell, immediate and suffocating. Tae-sung laughed, but the sound was laced with disdain. Don't be naive. You are a Hwang. You cannot involve yourself with just anyone. That woman is insignificant. With every word, Ji-hoon felt his anger rise. Insignificant to whom? To your distorted concept of status? Ha-yoon has more dignity and strength than anyone in this room. Tae-sung's expression darkened as he realized his son's resolve was unshakable. If you continue down this path, you will suffer the consequences. Your name will be tainted. Your empire will crumble. Ji-hoon stood slowly, adjusting his suit jacket. Then let it crumble. But I will not abandon the woman I love. That night, Ha-yoon was in her small apartment when the doorbell rang. As she opened the door, she saw Ji-hoon standing there, his eyes filled with both determination and exhaustion. Ji-hoon, what are you doing here? He stepped inside without waiting for permission, taking her hands in his. I chose you, Ha-yoon. I chose you over everything. Her eyes welled with tears. She knew what that meant. She knew the price he was willing to pay. I never wanted you to sacrifice yourself for me. Ji-hoon gave a faint smile, gently caressing her face. It's not a sacrifice. It's my choice. And in that moment, Ha-yoon knew that despite everything, they would face the world together. The winds had changed. Despite the board's threats and the fury of the Hwang family, Ji-hoon remained unwavering by Ha-yoon's side. The empire his father claimed would collapse only grew stronger. Shareholders saw that regardless of who stood beside him, Ji-hoon remained the same ruthless and brilliant leader. And contrary to everyone's expectations, his decision to follow his heart only reinforced his image of integrity. But the hardest battle was yet to come. The wedding was intimate, far from cameras and the lavish events of high society. A simple ceremony, surrounded by those who truly mattered. Ha-yoon did not wear a gown adorned with jewels, yet she was more radiant than any bride Ji-hoon could have imagined. As they walked down the aisle, he held her hand firmly, his eyes filled with emotion. I promise to stand by your side, no matter what happens. She smiled, tears welling up in her eyes. And I promise that you will never walk alone. In that moment, nothing else mattered. There were no empires, no families, no status, only them. Months later, Ji-hoon arrived home earlier than usual. He found Ha-yoon in the garden, watching the sunset with a serene expression. As he approached, she took his hand and gently placed it over her stomach. We have something to tell you, she said, with a radiant smile. His heart stopped for a second before racing wildly. Your... Ha-yoon nodded, and Ji-hoon felt an overwhelming warmth fill his chest. For the first time in his life, unconditional love blossomed inside him. He pulled her into a tight embrace, breathing in the weight of the moment. Thank you. His voice trembled with emotion. Thank you for being my family. And so the man who once had everything found his greatest treasure, the love of his wife and the future they were building together.